Have you ever noticed how the harder you try to stop overthinking and force yourself into action, the more elusive clear execution becomes? There's a reason for this, and once you see it, everything shifts. Let me show you what I mean. Most people approach overthinking like it's a mental virus to be eliminated, and execution like it's a muscle to be strengthened through willpower. They exhaust themselves trying to silence their analytical minds, push through mental paralysis, and force decisive action through sheer determination. But what if I told you that this very battle against overthinking is what keeps you trapped in endless analysis while preventing the natural flow of effective action? The people who effortlessly move from insight to implementation know something that the rest of us are missing. It's not what you think, and it's definitely not what they teach in productivity courses or time management seminars. Stay with me, because this understanding will transform not just how you approach decision-making and action-taking, but how you relate to your mind's natural intelligence and your capacity for sustained, effective execution. What I'm about to share might feel uncomfortable at first, then liberating, and finally transformative. Because here's what most people miss. Overthinking isn't the enemy of execution. It's often your mind's intelligent attempt to ensure successful action that has simply gotten stuck in an unproductive loop. When you understand how to work with your analytical nature rather than against it, the transition from thinking to doing becomes as natural as breathing. The loop. Have you noticed how trying to stop overthinking feels like trying to quiet a room full of people by shouting at them to be silent? There's something happening beneath the surface that most of us miss because we're focused on fighting against our analytical minds instead of understanding why they're working so hard in the first place. Picture Sarah, a talented graphic designer who had spent 3 months researching the perfect approach to launching her freelance business. She had created detailed competitor analyses, elaborate business plans, and comprehensive market research documents. She had analyzed pricing strategies, studied successful freelancers' websites, and researched every possible business structure and marketing approach. Yet despite all this preparation, she still felt not ready to actually start reaching out to potential clients. Every time Sarah tried to take concrete action, sending that first cold email, posting her portfolio online, or networking at local events, her mind would generate dozens of new questions and concerns. What if her pricing was wrong? What if her portfolio wasn't strong enough? What if she was targeting the wrong market? Each question felt legitimate and important, requiring more research and analysis before she could safely move forward. Sound familiar? Sarah represents millions of us caught in what I call the analysis infinity loop. We use our intelligence to gather information and consider possibilities, which is valuable, but then our minds keep generating new angles to analyze, new risks to consider, and new preparations that feel necessary before action becomes safe. But here's what's really happening beneath the surface. Sarah's overthinking wasn't random mental noise or a character flaw. It was her brilliant mind trying to protect her from failure, rejection, and uncertainty by attempting to think through every possible scenario before committing to action. The problem was that this protective mechanism had become counterproductive, creating more uncertainty and paralysis rather than the safety and clarity it was designed to provide. Sarah was caught in the fundamental misunderstanding that thinking and executing are opposing forces rather than complementary aspects of intelligent action. She believed she needed to finish thinking before she could begin doing, which created an impossible standard, because complex situations always generate new considerations and possibilities for analysis. What Sarah didn't realize, what most of us miss, is that overthinking often signals that our mind is trying to achieve through analysis what can only be achieved through experience. Her business planning had reached the point of diminishing returns, where additional thinking was creating confusion rather than clarity. But she kept analyzing because action felt risky and incomplete thinking felt safe. Think of how a river encounters a fallen tree across its path. The water doesn't stop flowing and endlessly analyze the best way around the obstacle. It naturally finds the path of least resistance, flowing around, under, or over the barrier while maintaining its essential forward momentum. The river adapts to obstacles through movement, not through stopping to plan the perfect route. Your natural capacity for effective action works similarly. When you encounter challenges or uncertainties, your mind naturally seeks information and considers options, which is valuable. But effective execution emerges from moving forward with awareness and adaptability rather than from trying to eliminate all unknowns before taking action. Most people get trapped because they treat thinking and doing as sequential phases, rather than understanding that effective execution involves dynamic interaction between analysis and action. They try to complete their thinking phase before beginning their doing phase, which is impossible because real-world action always generates new information that affects your understanding and plans. Sarah's overthinking wasn't a personal failing or lack of courage. It was the natural result of trying to achieve certainty through analysis in a situation that could only provide certainty through experience. Her mind kept generating new questions because questions about real-world execution can only be answered through real-world testing, not through additional theoretical analysis. The real trap isn't overthinking itself. It's the belief that more thinking will eventually lead to perfect clarity and confidence before action becomes necessary. This belief keeps you stuck in analysis because it sets an impossible standard. Perfect clarity before action is rarely available in meaningful endeavors, and waiting for it prevents the very experiences that would provide actual useful information. You might be thinking, but I need to think things through carefully before acting. Isn't planning important for successful execution? That's exactly the right question, because what I'm about to share isn't about abandoning thoughtful analysis or jumping into action recklessly. It's about understanding how to use thinking and doing together in a way that generates momentum rather than paralysis. The people who move effortlessly from insight to execution understand something that changes everything about how effective action actually works. They know that clarity comes through moving forward with awareness rather than through trying to figure everything out before beginning. They use thinking to support action rather than as a substitute for it. Sarah's story doesn't end with her trapped in eternal analysis. But her breakthrough didn't come from finally completing her research or discovering the perfect business strategy. It came from understanding that execution generates the very information and confidence that excessive analysis was trying to provide through thinking alone. The story. Let me tell you about Marcus, a software developer who had been preparing to create his own mobile app for over 2 years. He had sketched countless wireframes, researched every possible technology stack, analyzed successful apps in his target market, and created detailed feature specifications. He had read books about app development, taken online courses about user experience design, and joined forums where he discussed theoretical approaches with other aspiring developers. Marcus convinced himself that all this preparation was necessary because he wanted to do it right the first time. He'd seen other developers rush into projects without adequate planning and waste months building features that users didn't want or using technologies that couldn't scale. His analytical approach felt responsible and intelligent compared to jumping in without sufficient preparation. But after 24 months of research and planning, Marcus still didn't feel ready to write the first line of code. Every time he considered starting development, his mind would generate new concerns. What if he chose the wrong programming framework? What if his user interface design wasn't optimal? What if he spent months building something that nobody wanted? Each concern felt legitimate and led to more research, more analysis, and more preparation. But after 24 months of research and planning, Marcus still didn't feel ready to write the first line of code. Every time he considered starting development, his mind would generate new concerns. What if he chose the wrong programming framework? What if his user interface design wasn't optimal? What if he spent months building something that nobody wanted? Each concern felt legitimate and led to more research, more analysis, and more preparation. The breakthrough came during a weekend when Marcus's internet connection went down for an entire Saturday. Frustrated by his inability to do more research, he decided to start coding a simple version of his app idea using only the knowledge he already had. Without access to endless online resources and expert opinions, he had to trust his existing understanding and make decisions based on his current knowledge. Something remarkable happened during those 8 hours of offline development. Marcus discovered that actually building something, even a crude prototype, provided more useful information about his app idea than months of theoretical analysis had generated. He immediately understood which features felt natural to implement and which seemed unnecessarily complex. He got instant feedback about whether his user interface ideas actually worked in practice. Most importantly, he experienced the energizing satisfaction of creating something real rather than just thinking about creating it. By the end of that Saturday, Marcus had a working prototype that was rough but functional. More significantly, he had clarity about his next steps that felt grounded in experience rather than speculation. The uncertainty that had paralyzed him for months transformed into specific, actionable challenges that he could address through continued development and testing. Marcus realized that his 2 years of preparation had given him valuable knowledge, but continuing to prepare had become a sophisticated form of procrastination that actually prevented him from applying what he learned. The information and confidence he'd been seeking through analysis could only be generated through the process of building and testing real solutions. Over the following months, Marcus maintained a rhythm of building, testing, and refining that felt completely different from his previous approach. Instead of trying to plan everything perfectly before acting, he would analyze just enough to take the next meaningful step, then use the results of that action to inform his subsequent planning. This iterative approach generated rapid progress and continuous learning, rather than the paralysis and frustration of his previous endless preparation phase. 6 months later, Marcus had a working app with real users providing actual feedback about features and functionality. The app wasn't perfect, but it was real, useful, and continuously improving based on genuine user experience rather than theoretical speculation. More importantly, Marcus had developed confidence in his ability to move from ideas to implementation through intelligent action rather than exhaustive analysis. The profound insight from Marcus's transformation is that execution isn't the application of perfect planning. It's an intelligent conversation between thinking and doing that generates progress through iterative improvement. His breakthrough came not from finally completing his preparation, but from understanding how to use preparation as a launchpad for action rather than as a substitute for it. Marcus discovered that the confidence and clarity he'd been seeking through analysis actually emerged from the process of taking thoughtful action and learning from results. His mind's analytical capabilities became far more useful when directed toward real challenges that arose during development rather than toward imaginary problems that might never materialize. This story illustrates why the most effective people don't view thinking and executing as separate phases, but as integrated aspects of intelligent progress. They use analysis to inform action, and use action to generate insights that make their subsequent analysis more accurate and useful. The truth. Here's what transforms everything about moving from overthinking to execution. Thinking and doing aren't opposing forces that compete for your mental energy. They're complementary aspects of intelligence that work together to generate effective progress when properly integrated. You don't need to choose between thoughtful analysis and decisive action. You need to understand how to use them together in a way that creates momentum rather than paralysis. Most people exhaust themselves trying to complete their thinking before beginning their doing, or they force action while ignoring valuable analytical insights. But this separation creates artificial conflict between your mind's natural intelligence and your capacity for effective execution. The most successful people have learned to integrate thinking and doing in ways that amplify both capabilities. While conventional wisdom suggests that you should either think before you act or stop thinking and just do it, master practitioners understand that sustainable execution emerges from dynamic integration of analysis and action. They use thinking to support better action and use action to generate insights that improve their thinking. This creates an upward spiral of increasing effectiveness rather than the downward spiral of analysis paralysis. Think of how a skilled jazz musician improvises. They don't compose every note before playing, nor do they ignore musical theory and play randomly. Instead, they use their analytical understanding of harmony, rhythm, and structure to inform spontaneous, creative expression that responds to what's happening in the moment. The thinking and creating happen simultaneously, each enhancing the other in real time. Your approach to execution can work the same way. When you learn to integrate analytical intelligence with action-taking capability, you can move forward with confidence while remaining responsive to new information and changing circumstances. You're not abandoning thoughtful analysis, you're using it more skillfully to support effective action rather than as an alternative to action. This understanding completely transforms your relationship to uncertainty and imperfect information. Instead of seeing unknowns as obstacles that must be resolved through additional analysis, you begin to recognize them as natural aspects of complex endeavors that can only be addressed through intelligent experimentation and adaptive response. Here's what most people miss. The clarity and confidence that overthinking tries to provide through analysis can only be generated through the process of thoughtful action and learning from results. Your mind can gather information and consider possibilities, which is valuable, but real-world challenges require real-world solutions that emerge through testing and refinement, not through theoretical perfection. The secret lies in understanding that effective execution doesn't require eliminating uncertainty. It requires developing comfort with moving forward intelligently despite uncertainty. When you learn to use analysis to inform action rather than to delay it, you can maintain forward momentum while continuously refining your approach based on actual experience rather than speculative concerns. This is why forced action without thinking feels reckless, while endless analysis without action feels stuck. Both approaches ignore the natural intelligence that emerges when thinking and doing support each other. Integrated execution feels both thoughtful and decisive because it honors your analytical nature while channeling it toward productive forward movement. The practical implication is that effective execution develops through practice with intelligent action-taking rather than through perfecting your planning process. You learn to execute well by executing thoughtfully and learning from results, not by analyzing execution strategies until you feel completely confident about implementation. When you understand this principle, the transition from analysis to action becomes natural rather than forced. You're not fighting against your analytical mind or trying to eliminate your thoughtful nature. You're directing your intelligence toward the kind of thinking that supports forward movement rather than the kind that creates endless loops of additional preparation. The most successful executors aren't people who think less, they're people who think more effectively by using their analytical capabilities in service of continuous progress rather than as a substitute for action. Their thinking becomes more accurate and useful because it's grounded in real experience rather than theoretical speculation. Integration method. Now that you understand the principle, let's explore how to practically integrate thoughtful analysis with effective action in a way that generates continuous progress rather than analytical paralysis or reckless rushing. Productive analysis. The foundation of effective execution is learning to distinguish between productive analysis that supports action and unproductive analysis that substitutes for action. Not all thinking about your projects and goals serves forward movement. Some analysis actually creates more confusion and hesitation rather than clarity and confidence. Productive analysis focuses on information you can actually use to take better action in the near term. This includes understanding your immediate next steps, identifying potential obstacles you can prepare for, and clarifying your criteria for making upcoming decisions. This type of thinking has clear endpoints and naturally leads to specific actions you can take. Unproductive analysis typically involves trying to predict distant outcomes, planning for scenarios that may never arise, or seeking guarantees that aren't available through thinking alone. This type of analysis generates endless new questions and concerns rather than actionable insights, creating the mental loops that prevent forward movement. Action rhythm. The second foundation involves developing a sustainable rhythm that integrates thinking and doing throughout your execution process rather than trying to separate them into distinct phases. This rhythm allows you to maintain forward momentum while remaining responsive to new information and insights. Most people try to batch their thinking and doing, spending long periods planning followed by intense periods of execution. But this separation often creates analysis paralysis during planning phases and reactive scrambling during execution phases. Effective execution emerges from weaving thinking and doing together in shorter, more frequent cycles. Experiment with action cycles that include both analytical and execution components. You might spend 30 minutes reviewing your progress and planning next steps, then spend 90 minutes taking concrete action, then return to brief analysis of what you learned from that action. This rhythm keeps you moving forward while maintaining awareness and adaptability. Use completion of specific actions as natural transition points for brief analysis and planning. Instead of scheduling thinking time separately from doing time, use the completion of each meaningful task as an opportunity to assess progress, learn from results, and clarify your next steps based on current information. Practice taking action on incomplete information while maintaining awareness of what you're learning through the process. This builds comfort with uncertainty while ensuring that your execution generates useful feedback for ongoing refinement of your approach. Focus your analytical energy on factors you can actually influence through your actions rather than on external variables you can't control. Productive analysis helps you understand how to act more effectively within your circumstances rather than trying to eliminate all uncertainties and risks before acting. As you develop skill with productive analysis, you'll notice that your thinking becomes more focused and actionable. Instead of generating endless new concerns, your analysis provides specific insights that naturally translate into concrete steps you can take to move forward. Action rhythm. The second foundation involves developing a sustainable rhythm that integrates thinking and doing throughout your execution process rather than trying to separate them into distinct phases. This rhythm allows you to maintain forward momentum while maintaining awareness and adaptability. Most people try to batch their thinking and doing, spending long periods planning followed by intense periods of execution. But this separation often creates analysis paralysis during planning phases and reactive scrambling during execution phases. Effective execution emerges from weaving thinking and doing together in shorter, more frequent cycles. Experiment with action cycles that include both analytical and execution components. You might spend 30 minutes reviewing your progress and planning next steps, then spend 90 minutes taking concrete action, then return to brief analysis of what you learned from that action. This rhythm keeps you moving forward while maintaining awareness and adaptability. Use completion of specific actions as natural transition points for brief analysis and planning. Instead of scheduling thinking time separately from doing time, use the completion of each meaningful task as an opportunity to assess progress, learn from results, and clarify your next steps based on current information. Practice taking action on incomplete information while maintaining awareness of what you're learning through the process. This builds comfort with uncertainty while ensuring that your execution generates useful feedback for ongoing refinement of your approach. Develop sensitivity to when additional analysis would be helpful versus when more action is needed. Sometimes you need to step back and think through new developments. Other times, you need to push forward with implementation despite remaining uncertainties. Learning to recognize these different needs prevents getting stuck in either mode. Create feedback loops that allow your action results to inform your ongoing analysis and planning. Track what's working, what isn't, and what new information your execution is revealing about your project or goals. This makes your analytical activities more grounded and useful, while making your actions more intelligent and targeted. The rhythm that emerges should feel like a natural conversation between thinking and doing rather than like forced alternation between incompatible activities. When properly integrated, analysis enhances action, and action enriches analysis in a continuous cycle of improving effectiveness. Uncertainty navigation. The third foundation involves developing comfort with moving forward despite incomplete information and uncertain outcomes. This isn't about being reckless or ignoring legitimate concerns. It's about learning to act intelligently within uncertainty rather than waiting for certainty that may never come. Most overthinking stems from discomfort with uncertainty and the mistaken belief that additional analysis can eliminate risks and guarantee positive outcomes. But meaningful endeavors always involve unknowns that can only be resolved through experience rather than through additional thinking. Begin building uncertainty tolerance by taking small actions in low-risk situations where the potential negative consequences are manageable. This helps you develop confidence in your ability to handle unexpected outcomes and adapt to new information as it emerges through action. Practice distinguishing between uncertainties that require careful attention and uncertainties that you can address adaptively as they arise. Some unknowns merit serious analysis and preparation, while others are better handled through responsive adjustment during execution. Develop strategies for moving forward when you have good enough information rather than perfect clarity. This might involve starting with reversible decisions, beginning with small tests, or focusing on actions that provide valuable learning regardless of their ultimate success or failure. Learn to use uncertainty as information about what experiments or pilot projects might provide useful insights. Instead of seeing unknowns as obstacles to action, begin viewing them as questions that can be answered through intelligent testing and observation. Build your capacity to adapt and course-correct during execution rather than trying to plan for every possible scenario before acting. This adaptive capability reduces the pressure to predict everything correctly and makes action feel safer because you know you can respond intelligently to whatever emerges. As you develop comfort with uncertainty navigation, you'll discover that moving forward with awareness often provides better information about challenges and opportunities than extended analysis could generate through thinking alone. Momentum maintenance. The fourth foundation involves creating systems and approaches that maintain forward movement even during periods of confusion, setback, or low motivation. Sustainable execution requires developing resilience to the inevitable challenges that arise during any meaningful project or goal pursuit. Most people lose momentum when they encounter unexpected obstacles, unclear direction, or periods of reduced enthusiasm. They return to analysis mode hoping to think their way back to clarity and motivation, but this often creates more paralysis rather than renewed forward movement. Develop a collection of small, concrete actions you can take even when you're feeling uncertain or unmotivated. These might include organizing your workspace, reviewing previous progress, reaching out to mentors or collaborators, or completing routine tasks that support your larger goals. Having these options prevents complete stagnation during difficult periods. Create accountability systems that support consistent action-taking regardless of your momentary confidence level. This might involve working with partners, scheduling regular check-ins, or committing to specific deadlines that create external pressure for forward movement when internal motivation is low. Learn to recognize the difference between legitimate concerns that merit attention and mental resistance that's trying to avoid the discomfort or challenge of continued execution. Developing this discrimination helps you address real issues while not being derailed by natural psychological resistance to difficult tasks. Build celebration and acknowledgement practices that recognize progress and learning even when results don't match your initial expectations. This helps maintain motivation and positive momentum during the inevitable periods when execution feels more challenging than anticipated. Establish clear criteria for when to persist with current approaches versus when to modify your strategy based on feedback from your execution efforts. This prevents both stubborn continuation of ineffective approaches and premature abandonment of strategies that need more time to show results. The momentum maintenance systems should feel supportive rather than pressuring, helping you maintain forward movement through natural ups and downs rather than forcing consistent high performance that isn't sustainable over long periods. Living execution. As these integration methods become natural, something remarkable happens. The transition from thinking to doing stops feeling like a hurdle to overcome and starts feeling like a natural flow between complementary aspects of intelligent progress. Natural flow. True mastery of execution is characterized by seamless movement between analysis and action that feels effortless and organic rather than forced or artificial. You're not switching between thinking mode and doing mode, you're operating from integrated intelligence that includes both analytical awareness and action-taking capability. This natural flow emerges when you've learned to use thinking in service of better action rather than as an alternative to action. Your analytical activities become naturally focused and time-bound because they're directed towards supporting specific next steps rather than trying to eliminate all uncertainties before proceeding. People often notice that you seem to move from ideas to implementation with unusual speed and effectiveness. Not because you're thinking less, but because your thinking is more focused and immediately actionable. Your analysis generates clear next steps rather than additional questions that require more analysis. This natural flow typically includes enhanced creativity during execution, as the dynamic interaction between thinking and doing generates insights and solutions that neither pure analysis nor pure action could produce alone. You discover approaches and opportunities that emerge from the process of intelligent implementation. The sustainability of this natural flow comes from the fact that it honors both your analytical nature and your action-taking capacity rather than forcing you to choose between them or suppress one in favor of the other. The integration feels energizing rather than exhausting because it uses your natural intelligence more completely.
Adaptive confidence. As execution becomes integrated and natural, you develop a different kind of confidence that's based on your ability to navigate uncertainty and learn from experience rather than on having perfect plans or guaranteed outcomes. This adaptive confidence supports sustained action even in complex or ambiguous situations. Your confidence becomes less dependent on feeling certain about specific outcomes and more based on trust in your capacity to respond intelligently to whatever emerges through action. You know that you can handle unexpected challenges and adapt your approach based on new information, which makes starting action feel safer. This adaptive confidence naturally reduces overthinking because you're not trying to eliminate all risks through analysis. Instead, you're comfortable moving forward with awareness while trusting your ability to course correct as needed based on feedback from your actions. The confidence that emerges from integrated execution tends to be more realistic and sustainable than confidence based on elaborate planning or positive thinking, because it's grounded in actual experience with successful navigation of uncertainty and challenge. You begin approaching new projects and goals with excitement rather than anxiety, because you've learned that the process of intelligent execution is inherently interesting and rewarding regardless of specific outcomes. The journey becomes engaging rather than just a means to desired ends. Continuous learning. Integrated execution naturally supports ongoing learning and skill development because you're constantly receiving feedback from your actions and using that feedback to refine your approach. This creates accelerated growth compared to approaches that separate learning from implementation. Your analytical capabilities become more accurate and useful because they're continuously calibrated by real-world results rather than remaining purely theoretical. You develop practical wisdom about what works in actual situations rather than just conceptual knowledge about what should work in ideal circumstances. The learning that emerges from execution experience tends to be immediately applicable because it's generated from situations you're actually navigating rather than from abstract study. You're developing capabilities that directly enhance your effectiveness rather than accumulating information that may or may not prove useful. This continuous learning often leads to innovations and creative solutions that weren't apparent during pure analysis phases. The combination of analytical intelligence with hands-on experience frequently generates insights that neither approach could produce independently. Your comfort with learning through action also makes you more willing to experiment with new approaches and take calculated risks that expand your capabilities and opportunities. The execution process becomes a vehicle for ongoing development rather than just a means of achieving specific goals. Natural leadership. As your execution capabilities become integrated and effective, you often discover that others naturally look to you for guidance and inspiration regarding action taking and project implementation. This leadership emerges organically from your demonstrated capability rather than from self-promotion or position seeking. Your ability to move from ideas to implementation with intelligence and confidence becomes valuable to teams and organizations that struggle with analysis paralysis or poor execution. People seek your perspective because they recognize that you can help bridge the gap between planning and action effectively.
The leadership that emerges from authentic execution mastery tends to be practical and results-oriented rather than purely motivational. You help others by demonstrating effective approaches and sharing insights that come from actual implementation experience rather than theoretical knowledge. This natural leadership often extends into mentoring others who struggle with overthinking or action paralysis. Your understanding of how to integrate analysis and execution becomes a resource for people who are stuck in unproductive analytical loops or who fear taking action without perfect information. The influence you develop feels aligned and energizing rather than burdensome because it emerges from authentic capability and willingness to help others develop their own execution skills rather than from need for recognition or control. Meaningful impact. Perhaps the most fulfilling aspect of mastering execution is discovering that your enhanced ability to move from ideas to implementation naturally enables you to create meaningful impact on projects and causes that matter to you. Your execution capabilities become vehicles for contribution rather than just personal achievement. This meaningful impact emerges because you can take good ideas and actually implement them effectively, which is often where well-intended efforts fail. Your ability to bridge the gap between insight and action becomes valuable for addressing real-world challenges that require both analytical understanding and practical implementation. The projects you execute tend to have greater impact because they're informed by both thoughtful analysis and continuous learning from action. This combination often produces solutions that are both well-conceived and practically effective rather than just theoretically sound or well-implemented but poorly designed. Your capacity for execution also allows you to respond quickly to emerging opportunities and changing circumstances, which often enables you to create impact in situations where slower, more analytical approaches would miss critical timing windows. The satisfaction that comes from creating meaningful impact through effective execution often provides motivation and energy that sustains continued development of your capabilities and willingness to take on increasingly challenging and important projects. Legacy creation. As execution mastery becomes fully integrated, many people discover that their approach to implementation naturally evolves toward creating lasting value that extends beyond their direct involvement. This isn't about ego or recognition, it's about using your execution capabilities to create systems and solutions that continue generating benefit over time. This legacy creation often manifests through developing others' execution capabilities, creating processes and systems that outlast your personal involvement, or implementing solutions to important problems that continue providing value long after completion. The legacy that emerges from authentic execution mastery tends to be practical and beneficial rather than self-serving because it's based on genuine capability and commitment to effective implementation rather than on desires for recognition or immortality. Building lasting impact becomes a natural expression of your developed execution capabilities rather than a separate goal to pursue. You find yourself naturally thinking about sustainable implementation and long-term value creation because your experience has shown you the difference between temporary achievements and enduring contributions. Wisdom integration. The ultimate expression of execution mastery is the integration of effective action-taking with deep wisdom about what's worth implementing and how execution serves human flourishing rather than just goal achievement. This wisdom prevents the busyness and mechanical productivity that can characterize execution without deeper understanding. This integrated wisdom includes understanding the difference between execution that enhances your humanity and execution that diminishes it, between action that serves genuine needs and action that merely satisfies ego desires or external pressures. Your execution capabilities become guided by deeper values and understanding of meaningful contribution. The wisdom that emerges from authentic execution mastery also includes realistic understanding of the role that action plays in a well-lived life. You neither overvalue productivity as the source of all fulfillment nor undervalue execution as meaningless activity. Instead, you understand implementation as one important way of expressing your human potential and contributing to shared well-being. This wisdom integration makes your execution more sustainable and satisfying because it's connected to deeper understanding of purpose and meaning rather than to superficial ideas about productivity and achievement. Your action-taking serves authentic development and contribution rather than replacing genuine fulfillment with busy activity. Living excellence. When execution mastery becomes fully integrated, you discover that effective implementation becomes a natural way of being rather than something you do during specific projects or in particular areas of life. The integration of thoughtful analysis with decisive action becomes your natural approach to navigating all of life's challenges and opportunities. This living excellence doesn't mean constant high performance or never experiencing uncertainty or hesitation. It means bringing your integrated intelligence to whatever you're dealing with rather than operating from either pure analysis or thoughtless reaction. Excellence becomes about expressing your natural capabilities fully rather than meeting external standards. The sustainability of living excellence comes from the fact that it's based on working with your natural intelligence rather than forcing artificial approaches to action-taking. You're not trying to become a different type of person, you're optimizing how your existing analytical and action capabilities work together. This is how the transition from overthinking to execution ultimately transforms from a problem to solve into a natural way of operating. You're not fighting against your analytical nature or forcing yourself to act before thinking. You're creating integration between thinking and doing that allows both capabilities to support each other in service of continuous intelligent progress. When you understand this principle, moving from insight to implementation becomes as natural as any other form of optimal human functioning. You're not acquiring new capabilities, you're learning to use your existing intelligence more skillfully. The result is sustained effective action that feels like natural self-expression rather than forced productivity, which makes execution both satisfying and sustainable rather than exhausting and artificial. This is the true secret of stopping overthinking and starting execution. It's not about choosing action over analysis, but about integrating both capabilities in service of intelligent progress. When you create this integration consistently, execution becomes your natural response to opportunities and challenges rather than something you have to force through willpower or motivation. And this natural effectiveness becomes the foundation for contributions and achievements that feel authentic, meaningful, and sustainable rather than forced or artificially driven.